Peter chapter 3. Now you guys are all curious. It's like, what was he thinking about? What's the clutter? But maybe you're not that curious. By the time you get home, you'll even forget I said everything I just said. So 1 Peter chapter 3. All right. You guys know the greatest band in all, right? Is that established for you? Right? Is it DC Talk, right? You guys understand that. That's clear, the greatest band. It's an indisputable fact. Yeah, getting thumbs up. And I don't have time to explain all that to you. But if you want to, we could go through that, and I'll show you how right I am on this. But anyways, DC Talk. One of the things DC Talk did is DC Talk prepared me. This is classic DC Talk, right? They prepared me, and I didn't even know they were preparing me. All right, so the year was 1996. This is a true story. I'm at Faith Baptist Bible College in Ankeny, Iowa, and me and a couple of friends are walking back to the dormitory, and we're just on the sidewalk, or like a couple hundred yards from our dorm at this point, and this car pulls up alongside us, and these guys were in this car. There was like 5 guys in this car, 3 of us on the sidewalk, and none of us had ever seen any of the guys in the car before, but they start driving real slow next to us, driving the same pace that we're walking. And the passenger rolls down his window, and he starts yelling at us. He starts yelling obscenities at us, screaming at us, calling us a bunch of Bible thumpers, and just, all sorts of horrible things that he wants to do to us, and, things about our mothers, and just really saying some hateful, nasty things. And we just kind of look at him, and none of us really want to engage with him. It's like, let's just keep walking. Then that's what we said. Like, guys, let's just keep walking. Just keep walking. We don't need this. Well, they drive a little bit further ahead, and they get out of the car. All 5 of them come, and it's just the other 4 guys are just standing there. They never said a word. But this one guy, who's the mouth of it, of the group, he starts yelling at us and scream and getting like really close to Mark was the guy that was standing closest to him, and he starts getting real close to Mark and getting up in Mark's face and puffing his chest out, and he's challenging the 3 of us. Like, he's like, I want to take you on 1-on-3. I'm going to beat you guys down. Just me against you 3. I got you. And he just like screaming all these things, and most of them were religious insults in nature. And this is getting pretty tense. And I'm really wanting this to be done. I just want to get back to my dorm. That's where I was going anyway. Now I really want to get back to my dorm. Like, I don't have any interest in fighting him. He's like, you want to fight? You want to fight? Like, no. Like, part because I'm not an idiot. That's a big reason. But like, no, I don't want to fight. We want to keep going. Get back to our dorm. And he starts screaming. I said, I'm really not sure how to handle this until I knew exactly what to do, until he yelled one insult at us that just, oh, I have it now. He called us Jesus freaks. Yeah, DC Talk, the greatest band of all time, and their iconic album, Jesus Freak, the title song of it, like the chorus of it, like, what will people do when they hear that I'm a Jesus freak? What will people do when they find out it's true? I don't really care if they label me a Jesus freak, because there ain't no disguising the truth. That's where one of you was supposed to go, there. But, yeah, like, it could just hit, like, I can't, there was like this peace that came over me as soon as he called us Jesus freaks. And it was me, Mark, and Chuck, the 3 of us. We walk back to the dorm, and all 3 of us start quoting the song to each other. Of like, yeah, I don't really care if they label me a Jesus freak. DC Talk had got me ready for that moment. I knew just what to do. Peter, writing to his friends who are scattered throughout various parts of the Roman Empire, he actually prepared them kind of the way DC Talk prepared me. This whole passage today is, what are you going to do when people call you a Jesus freak? What are you going to do when people come at you because of the things that you believe and because of the way you live your life? This is going to be, he's getting the people ready to deal with persecution. I've got a line that I want to use, that I'm going to use repeatedly in this, because some of these principles, by the way, he's speaking specifically about persecution, but I think they work in times of great conflict as well. And so the line I'm going to use is, in a world that won't stop shouting. And have you noticed that? Like that seems to be what America is excelling at right now is volume. We can yell really loud. We can yell really hateful things about one another, about those people over there, about those jerks over there. We're getting really, really good at yelling really loudly. And I want to take some time to talk about what it looks like to live as Christians in a world that just won't stop shouting. We're going to work our way through the text here this morning. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 13. It says, "Now, who is there to harm you if you are zealous for what is good? But even if you should suffer for righteousness' sake, you will be blessed. Have no fear of them, nor be troubled. But in your hearts, honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you. Yet do it with gentleness and respect, having a good conscience, so that when you are slandered, those who revile your good behavior in Christ may be put to shame. For it is better to suffer for doing good, if that should be God's will, than for doing evil. For Christ also suffered once for sins, the righteous for the unrighteous, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but being made alive in the spirit." And we'll stop right there. We're going to pick up verse 18 and the rest of that next week or next time we get into that text there. But I want to start. We're going to work through verse by verse. Verse 13 is that, "Who is there to harm you if you prove to be zealous for doing that which is good?" Who is to harm you if you're zealous for that which is good? I think it's interesting. Peter's getting ready to talk to them about how to behave themselves, how to handle themselves when persecution comes. But before he gets to that persecution conversation, he reminds them is that you should actually be living good lives. To the point that it's not just that you're good, it's that you're zealous for good. Before we talk persecution, remember to be good. See, characteristically speaking, even those who hate Christians, they kind of like Christians that do good. It's hard to hate somebody that's nice. It's hard to hate somebody that's kind. It's hard to hate somebody that's generous. It's hard to hate somebody that's honest. Now, it's not impossible. It's not impossible to do that, but it's a lot harder to do that. And in fact, I think we can go so far as to say, and I don't think I'm abusing the text too severely on this, to say that if you have a lot of people in your life who don't like you, you're probably doing something wrong. Because people tend to like nice people, normally speaking. They really do. I was listening to a preacher from Arizona go over this, and he gave an illustration that only an Arizona could possibly give, but it made sense to me. He was preaching in the summertime in Arizona, and he was going through the same text, and he's like, "Have you guys seen the forecast for today? It's a forecast is the high of 115 degrees, 115 degrees." And so I'm going to use this illustration as my own, but I'm giving him credit for it there. So now I'm going to shift and talk as though it's my illustration. Imagine, if you will, you're in this 115 degree heat, right? And it's one of those days that you have to be out working in it. You can't, hole up in air conditioning somewhere. You can't be out swimming in the pool or something. It's like you have to be out working all day long in this 115 degree heat, and it's baking you. It is beating you. It is sucking the energy out of you the way only heat is able to do. You have been out there and you've been slamming the water all day long, but you're still just utterly exhausted from the heat. And the workday's done, and you get to go home. What are you looking forward to? Me? I am looking forward to something tall, cold, and icy, and then I'm just going to sit directly in front of the vent that is closest to the air conditioner, where the air is the coldest. And I'm just going to sit there. I'm just going to oh, cool me down, cool me down, cool me down, cool me down. And now imagine you go home, and as you walk in the front door, there somebody is in your house building a fire. What goes through your head? It's like, are you kidding me? 115 degrees and you're going to turn up the heat? Don't you think it's time that somebody turned on the air conditioning? And see, guys, one of the unique privileges that we have as Christians, living in the world that we live in right now, in a world that won't stop shouting, in a world like the heat. I don't know if you've noticed. Have you noticed the heat picked up a little bit this last year? You notice things got really, really, really angry in 2020. Our country right now is on fire. It absolutely is. One of the privileges that we have is we get to come into the room and not build another fire. We get to come in the room and turn on the AC. That's part of our role here. Part of the role of Christians is to bring the temperature down. You want to know part of why I skipped that little section in 1 Peter? Because I'm pretty angry about those subjects. I'm really angry about those subjects. And I could give you guys a really wonderful rant. Oh, I could rant on these. I could rant so good. And I would walk away from here. You might think it was a terrible sermon, but I would walk away from here so impressed with the knowledge that I dropped on you, the clever way that I said all of the things that I said. I would be fantastic. I have no doubt in it. But guys, I'm angry about it. I really am. I'm angry. Some of my anger is righteous. I'm certain of that. But some of my anger, it's not righteous anger. Some of the anger that I'm feeling right now is that I'm angry because I live in an angry world. And that's just kind of rubbing off on me, and I'm kind of picking up the heat of the community that I'm in, and now I'm starting to radiate back some of that heat. And I just realized, as a Christian, my job is not to crank up the heat in a world that's 115 degrees. My job as a Christian is to cool things down. And that when people are losing their heads, people are screaming obscenities at one another, I'm going to be the one that's the voice of affirmation and kindness. That when people begin to demonize every single person that disagrees with them on something, like our job as Christians is to come in, it's like, oh, you disagree with me? Would it be all right if I just sat and listened to you for a while? Just humbly learned from you. I may not agree with you when it's over, but I just, you're valuable. Like you're made in the image of God. I'm just going to sit and I'm just going to listen and I'm going to learn from you. Our job is to bring the temperature down. We don't need to be building more fires. We just don't. You guys remember this, Christians, we are not here to win arguments. We're here to win people. And that's something different altogether. Verse 14. But even if you should suffer for the sake of righteousness, you are blessed. And do not fear their intimidation, and do not be troubled. Suffer for the sake of righteousness. We're taking similar idea. Verse 13 was about doing good. Be zealous for doing good. Now it's talking about suffering for the sake of righteousness. You get into that word righteousness. I listened to somebody here recently. I was working on a project, and I found this speaker on YouTube. She had a series of lessons that piqued my interest. And so I put on my headphones, and I just spent some time working on my project. And she had, I think it was like 10 lessons, and she just went through all of them. And they were like 15 minutes long each, something like that. Listen to her speak through all of it. And one of her key subject matters was righteousness. And she made the comment, she says, I grew up in the church. And as a teenager, if you would have come to me and asked me, what does righteous living look like? She would have said, here's basically what I would have told you, something along these lines. To live a righteous life is to not wear short skirts, not use swear words, and not get drunk. And things along those lines. That, to me, was what righteous living was about. She said, I used to associate that with righteous living until I did a study on what righteousness is. And she said in the Old Testament, the word righteousness, now, to be fair, I have not done the research to check what she's saying, so throw that one out there. That way, if this is wrong, then I can say, well, I warned you that it might not be right. Plausible that I'm going for here. Is my microphone cutting in and out a lot? Or is it just my head? Okay. All right. Okay, if something needs to be done, we can do it. Otherwise, I'll feel good. Just carry on. All right. There we go. What was I talking about? Righteousness. Somebody says, what was that? Deniability, plausible deniability. There we go. Oh, yeah. I think she probably is right, though. In the Old Testament, when you talk about righteousness, there's actually another word that is often connected to it. It's the word justice. Old Testament-wise, justice and righteousness go hand in hand. And justice here not being like round up the bad guys and convict them of crimes and send them to jail, although that's actually a part of it. Justice greater idea of a society that's structured the way it should be, where all things are as they ought to be, kind of is very much connected to shalom, and justice there being specifically about things like taking care of the widow and the orphan in their distress, of looking out for the immigrant and the impoverished, and like basically it's taking care of vulnerable people. And these 10 lessons that she gave, when she was talking about righteous living, she said, biblically speaking, particularly Old Testament, is that if you're going to live righteously, what that means is that you're going to take care of the people who can't take care of themselves. That's what it is to be righteous. To the point that actually, when the apostles, they were with Jesus, and then Jesus ascends into heaven, leaves the apostles, commissions the apostles to go build this church. Like when they start writing about what it looks like to live as followers of God, James, the apostle James, who was kind of like one of the patriarchs of the apostles, if you will, he went so far as to say, you don't have real religion if you're not taking care of the widow and the orphan. If you aren't doing these things, there's something about following Christ that you don't understand yet. And she's talking, and so when Peter here is getting into this but even if you should suffer for the sake of righteousness, guys, what we should be known for as Christians is not the things that we won't do. It's true. We won't lie. We won't sleep around, right? Like we won't get drunk. We won't disobey the authorities. We all true. If we're doing the Christian life the way it's supposed to be done, all of those things are true. But that's not really what we're about, is it? That's just kind of like some of what we are, some of what we do. You know, the best way to reflect, I think, one of the best ways to reflect the person of Christ is to be known for the way that we love people. Is to be known for the way that we love people, particularly those who have been left out, particularly those who have been rejected, particularly those who have been forsaken, particularly those who have been abused and misused by people who should have been good to them. The Romans emperor, he showed up a couple hundred years after Peter. He was actually the last of the pagan emperors of Rome. He's known in history as Julian the Apostate. Isn't that a great thing? You know, like there's the entirety of your life summed up in 2 words, the apostate. But that was Julian. He was the emperor of Rome. He was not a fan of Christianity at all. In fact, he wrote this essay. The title of it is Against the Galileans. For the Romans, when if you go through and read through stuff when they would write, they would interchangeably use the words Jews, Galileans, and Christians together. They kind of viewed, like, you're all from the same, you know, you guys all look the same, right? Like you guys, you know, like, so they would use those terms interchangeably. So when he says against the Galileans, he's speaking about Christians, against the Christians. He writes this whole essay, which he actually went through Christian theology, and he went through point by point the things Christians believe, and he wrote this essay to kind of tear apart Christianity. And for people who didn't like Christianity, they viewed Emperor Julian's writing as this irrefutable proof that Christianity is a wacko religion. For Christians, it wasn't quite sufficient to prove that it was a wacko religion. It's usually the way it works is that we tend to listen to people inside our own echo chamber, kind of thing. Anyway, so he hated the Christians, absolutely hated the Christians, and but he had this problem. See, what Emperor Julian really wanted was he wanted his religion, which he considered which was the religion of Rome. He wanted to thrive, but it didn't thrive. But you know what religion did thrive in Rome? Christianity. He was bugged by that. He's like, this is the religion of the Galileans, not Rome. They should not be doing well here. We should be doing well here. And there's this letter, this correspondence that he wrote to one of his associates in the government, and he was bemoaning what was going on. Listen to what he had to say. He said, why then do we think that this is sufficient and do not observe the kindness of Christians to strangers and through their care for the burial of the dead? It is a scandal that there is not a single Jew who is a beggar, and that the godless Galileans care not only for their own poor, but for ours as well, while those who belong to us look in vain for the help that we should render them. And he went on and he made available to whoever he was writing to, here's a bunch of money, food, and wine for you to go take care of the poor because we're sick of the Christians taking care of our poor for us. It's like he simultaneously is like, if you were like Christians, like, hey, Julian, Christians, he'd be like, oh, I hate those guys. And man, they're nice. What the people in Julian's day were doing is they were living out exactly what Peter's telling us here in 1 Peter 3. When you suffer, suffer for the sake of righteousness. If they're going to say, man, I hate you, which they will at times, they should also follow it up with, and boy, they're nice. Right? Oh, then he says, in that same verse, he gives them two things. He says, do not fear, and do not be troubled. We're troubled. The Greek there, just anxious, distressed. The word fear is, when he says don't fear, it's just struck with amazement. Do not be struck with amazement. In other words, when somebody's coming at you and they're upset with you because of your faith, don't be like whoa, what? I did not. I mean, because you should see it coming. Jesus himself told us, he says, don't be surprised when the world hates you. They hated me. And Jesus is a fair bit nicer than you or I. He's a fair bit more beautiful than you or I. He's a fair bit more generous than you are. He's a fair bit more pure than you or I. And he could do miracles. And they still hated him. He says, and if they're going to hate me, they're absolutely going to hate you. Do not be surprised by this. I had a message for teenagers. This is where I was like, teens, I got something for you, but most of them went back with the kids. So you're going to pass this on to your teens. This is where I was going to go. Actually, no, we could just put just put them on the spot. Like, hey, when it comes to stand right here, I got something for you. No, you guys remember the teen years? The teen years are this weird time. It's this weird time in life when what you're supposed to be is completely who you are and completely like everybody else. Right? Like there's this pressure, like just like discover yourself and be who you are. But just make sure that you stand out, kind of a thing. Like there is so much pressure in the teen years to conform, which, by the way, those of you that are in that, the teen years, college, it dials down a little bit in college. Once you get past the college years, it really, for the most part, tends to level out. It becomes a little less prominent then. It really does. But in the teen years, this is just part of it. There's just pressure to conform. You need to do what the group's doing. You need to be accepted by your peers. And if you aren't accepted by your peers, well, that's a big, big, big deal. For those who are Christians in their teen years, you will likely find yourself in situations where they will think that you're weird. They will think that you're wrong. They will think that you're stupid. They will think that you're judgmental. They will call you things like goody-goody and holier than thou. And they will breathe a lot of hatred about you. Some of it will be directed at you, and you will hear about it personally. Much of it will be said about you when you aren't around, simply because you're a Christian. Simply because, as a Christian, there are certain ethics that you live by when it comes to sex, when it comes to alcohol, when it comes to partying, when it comes to drugs, when it comes to things that are important to you. Like, you just have a different ethic that you're going to live by. And most people are going to be fine with that. They're just like, fine, like, I don't care, live however you want. I don't care. But there's going to be a number of people that because of that, something about that bugs them to the point that they feel like they need to speak up and put you in your place. And they will bring heat towards you in some fashion or another. I've got a t-shirt. Oh, it was supposed to be on the table. It's behind the wall. I found this on the internet, and I bought it because it spoke to me. This one might fit for some of you guys here, too. This fits the context of it. All right, ready? Here you go. This is my encouragement to you. Be who you are. You're a follower of Jesus. Be that. They'll adjust. And even if they don't, be who you are. You'll adjust. Just stay true to what you believe. Stay true. They're going to pressure you. They will. They're going to try to humiliate you. They're going to say horrible things about you. It won't be fun. I wish we could make it go away. I wish they would treat you with kindness and respect and acceptance, and all the things because that's how you should be treated. You're a child of God. That's how you should be treated. But they won't treat you that way. They will breathe hatred out towards you, but still be who you are. Be a follower of Jesus Christ. Don't be surprised when they hate you. They hated Jesus. And I like you guys. I do, but none of you are Jesus. And if they're going to hate somebody as wonderful as him, it shouldn't surprise you that you hate somebody just like you. Another quote I heard, I really like this. Don't take criticism from people you'd never go to for advice. Isn't that good? Don't take criticism from people you'd never go to for advice. All right, verse 15. But sanctify Christ as Lord in your heart. Always be ready to make a defense to everyone who asks you to give an account for the hope that is in you, yet with gentleness and a reverence. Now, do you know what I've always heard done with this passage? I think every time I've heard this talked about is it inevitably leads to this conversation about apologetics, which that's just a $15 word to just convey as like defense of the faith that we're going to defend, and which inevitably then leads to like, so let's study the whole creation evolution thing, or let's study philosophy and is there a God, atheism, theism kind of thing, or biblical inerrancy, or be ready to give an account for that kind of a thing. I've always heard this text used in that way, and I don't think that's a misuse of the text, but that's not really where Peter went with it. It wasn't be ready to give a defense for your faith. So here, read these philosophers, and you'll be ready to philosophically debate people about your faith. Now, there's a place for that. What he connects it to, though, is sanctification. He's like, set yourself apart for Christ. What he connects it to is the hope that people are going to ask you what Peter's gone through. Could you give me a solid ontological argument for the existence of God? That's not what he connects it to. He connects it to people are going to see that you're living your life with hope based on the way you're handling suffering, based on the persecution. It's the hope they're interested in. It's not the scientific reasoning behind it. Anyway, again, if that's a subject that is of interest to you, by all means, study it. We need people who are gifted in that. We do. I love sitting and listening to people who are really talented in those areas. I think they have a lot to offer us. I'm glad that they study the things they do. But I don't think the point is in this of let's go study a bunch of things so that we can win debates. It's actually, do you know how people change beliefs? We've been talking about this here recently. Is there any of you guys that have ever been debated out of your belief? Like you believed A, and B was the exact opposite of that, and then you engaged in a spirited debate with somebody, and I see it now. Now I believe B. Or have you ever argued anybody into Christianity? Have you ever argued anybody into your political position? Have you ever argued anybody into anything? I've never done that. I've never successfully done it. I've never had anybody argue me into anything. I've spent a lot of time in the church, basically my whole life. It's kind of my thing. I'm not saying there's not ever been anybody that was persuaded into the faith through a debate, but I can't think of a single person. I don't know anybody. Maybe you were. And if you were, I'd love to hear it. I'd love to hear the story. I'm not saying there's no place for this. I've just never seen it happen. There's this, I wish I could remember where I read this or where I saw this, and I couldn't. I was researching again this week, hoping I could find it, and I couldn't. This guy did this research on what does it take for people to change their beliefs? How do you get somebody to believe something different than what they currently believe? He did a scientific study of this. You know what he found? It had nothing to do with information and everything to do with the person sharing the information. He said, here's the way it works, is that when somebody believes something different than you do, you're not inclined to believe them. But when you get to know that person, and that person shows themselves to be a good, kind soul, and that person becomes a friend, all of a sudden, you're a little more open to their ideas. And he says, and his research went on to talk about how the reason that people are persuaded is not because of argumentation. It's because when you have somebody that you like, you want what they believe to be true. There's something inside of us that wants that. There's something inside of us that wants to believe the same things as the people we're closest to. It's just in human nature there. And Peter here is not saying, is like, hey, guys, be prepared to give a defense for the faith that is in you. So let's come up with some airtight, stone cold locks on our faith that, they'll never be able to debunk this. Even Stephen Hawking couldn't pick this one apart. Like boom, drop some knowledge on you. Gotcha. You're a Jesus follower now, aren't you? Look at that little nugget I gave you. And it just doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. People are persuaded not through our arguments. They're persuaded through our love, our kindness, our generosity, our character. And when they know that we love them, and which, by the way, we also have to be careful in this, not carefulness. No, careful is the wrong word. Let's not turn this into a bait and switch or a point of manipulation. It's like, I'm going to be nice to you because that's the most effective way to persuade you. No, I'm going to be nice to you. I'm going to love you because Jesus loved me. And a cool thing that could come out of that, I hope comes out of that, is that you find in Jesus the same hope that I've had. You find in Jesus that salvation that has set me free. I hope you have that too. But I'm just going to love you. And I'm going to love you. And I'm going to love you. And I'm going to love you. You don't believe anything I believe. I'm loving you. I find you completely irritating. Now I'm going to love you. And Kurt, I pointed over here. I'm just going to love you. I'm going to love you. I'm going to love you. I'm going to love you. And I think as we do that, that's when conversations come about. And that's when Peter is saying, in those moments, when we're set apart for Christ, when we're good people, and we live our lives with hope, there will be chances at those moments to share the hope that we have with people that we love, who know that we love them. Okay. All right. We doing all right? We're doing okay. I got a little bit left. All right, verse 16. And keep a good conscience so that in the thing in which you are slandered, those who revile your good behavior in Christ will be put to shame. For it is better, if God should will it so, that you should suffer for doing right rather than for doing what is wrong. All right. I just can't say this. If they hate you, it shouldn't be because you're a condescending jerk. And condescending means to talk down to. You would have been disappointed if I hadn't done that, right? Okay. Yeah. Now, when it comes to persecution of Christians, the 20th century was the bloodiest century in history for Christianity. More Christians were killed in the 20th century than any other century in human history. The most persecuted people group on planet Earth right now is Christians. That's an indisputable fact. They are being rounded up and killed every single day around the planet. There are people right now that are meeting, our brothers and sisters, meeting in secret. And some of them are going to be rounded up today, and they will be arrested, and some of them will be killed today because of their faith in Jesus Christ. All right, there's absolutely a persecution that's going on there. There is a hostility in our nation towards Christianity that is absolutely there. I understand that. I do think we probably show a little respect to the people in Egypt, say those, was it 21? They were lined up on the beach and had their heads chopped off. I do think we owe them a little bit of respect to not compare current persecution in America with what they've got, right? They're playing on a whole nother level over there. Let's not put ourselves in their camp, all right? I do want to do that. But I do know there's some things that are going on here. However, let me say this. In America, what I've seen, personal observations, okay? Do you know what I've seen far more often than Christians being persecuted? I've seen Christians who come off as ridiculously judgmental. I've seen Christians who refuse to hear or respect a perspective other than their own. I've seen Christians who align themselves with people who are the exact opposite of virtuosity. I've seen Christians who are really, really preachy. And then when they are one or all of those things and people react negatively to that, the Christian steps back and is like, you see, they're going to hate us. They hated Jesus, they're hating us too. And it's like, yeah, no, because I'm a Christian and I kind of hate you right now. I think the reason they hate you is not because you're a Christian. I think they hate you because you're a jerk. Like, I think that's why they hate you there. And what he's pointing here is like, hey, if you're going to suffer, make sure that you're not suffering because you're a jerk. It's basically what it is in the Greek, all right? In a world that won't quit shouting, don't give them plausible reasons to shout at you, all right? And then the last thing here, in a world that won't quit shouting, remember, they shouted at Christ first. Verse 18, for Christ also died for sins once, the just for the unjust, so that he might bring us to God, having been put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the spirit. Sometimes we're going to be rejected, guys. We will. Sometimes people are going to get really bothered for the things that we believe, for the things that we won't get excited about and the things that we do get excited about, for the ways we will live our lives and the way we won't live our lives. Some people are just going to be really bothered by that. Some people are just going to be bothered by the fact that we took the moniker Christian. They absolutely will. But when that happens, guys, remember, they hated Jesus first. And the thing about Jesus is this is where we get to the cross. If I were to explain, I kind of keep an unofficial list in my head. If you give me 5 stories, like take somebody who knows nothing about Jesus, nothing about him at all, and I get 5 stories to represent what Jesus is like. I kind of keep this unofficial list. There's a handful of them that are there for me. One of them is from the cross. One of the things that Jesus says from the cross is that he's hanging there. He says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. You want to know what Jesus is like? Take some time to consider what kind of a person he had to be to have people in the process of murdering him, and he takes the time to plead for their forgiveness. Now, nobody's tried to murder me before. If they were trying to, I don't know that the prayer that came to mind would be, Father, forgive them. I could see myself calling on the name of God, but more like, was it Spirit of Elijah? Like, could you just bring fire down from heaven? I'm reading through King and Elisha, he summoned like God, send some bears, like slaughter my enemies. I could think of those kinds of prayers, but to pray, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do, as they shouted at him, as they murdered him, he took up their defense, which is what he did for me, right? Didn't he do that for you too? When you were in your sin, what did he do? He loved you. When you were dead in your trespasses and sin, what did he do? He died in your place so that you could be made alive. Like he came and got you. While you were yet a sinner, Christ died for you. That's how he demonstrated his love for you. And so, yeah, do we live in a world that won't stop shouting? My goodness, do we ever? America just will not shut up. I don't know what more has to happen before they will. Like, what more needs to go on before it's like, hey, maybe we're not doing this right. We got a lot of hurt and a lot of anger. We even have dead people in our nation now because of all the anger. Maybe I don't know what it's going to take, but our nation will not shut up. They won't stop screaming at each other. And guys, we're here. We live here. This is our time. This is our generation. We get to be the ones who come in to be the air conditioner on a hot, hot day. It's like the world's like, everybody's screaming at me. It's like, but this guy right here, Jeff, you, man, he was nice to me. He was that cool breeze. He was that shady place that brought kindness to me when the rest of the world brought anger and heat. And in so doing, I think in some fashion, we will remind them of what Christ was for us. When the heat was on with us, Jesus came and cooled things down. Right. All right, there you have it. 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 13 through 18. Why don't we close in prayer? Father, thank you for the gift of 1 Peter chapter 3. Him teaching us how to handle slander, how to handle persecution when it comes. Lord, I pray that what he speaks of here would be a good, it'd be true of us, that we live our lives with goodness, that we live our lives with righteousness, that we're kind. We are kind to the people in our world, even when they're mean to us, that we're kind, that we would love our enemies and we would bless those who revile us, just as Jesus Christ himself did. May that be true of us. And Lord, while we're here, I think I speak for all of us when I say that I find these days to be fairly confusing. I don't always know how to respond to this. There's some legitimate injustice going on in our world, and I want to be a part of speaking out against that and bringing goodness to our community, but I don't want to get sucked into all the anger, the hostility, the heat that's going on in here. And Lord, you know, I process this with you. I'm sure others in here feel similar. It's real easy for me to get to bitterness. It's real easy for me to get to severe disappointment in people. And I don't want that to be my spirit. I don't want that to be our spirit. Would you cause us to be humble, gentle? Maybe, Lord, make us those servants who remember that we've been forgiven much and that we in turn can forgive others also. We need your wisdom. This one's beyond us. I don't think any of us have ever faced a year quite like this before. And Lord, we need you. So please help us. We love you. Thanks for hearing us. We pray these things in your name. Amen. All right. Thanks for coming, guys.